just reach out to them or anyone that you know. Reach out to someone that you know and just say, I'm thinking of you today, and send them the little flower bouquet emoji and just say, thinking of you. It is the Today Hallmark card, and just let them know that they are on your mind. A little bit goes a long way, and who knows, maybe that starts a conversation.
Welcome back to the Own Your Awkward podcast. I'm your host, Andy Vargo, and every episode we get into what has made our guests vulnerable and how they've learned how to own their awkward in order to live their best life. Stay tuned so you can hear every awkward moment in today's show. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Own Your Awkward podcast. I am super happy we are about to get pretty awkward, and I have one of my new friends who I met through another amazing friend. You're going to hear all about that in a bit. Sarah McNamara. Sarah, how are you today?
You just owned it. It's Amanda McNamara.
Oh, my God.
And you did it for Sarah.
I almost did a big curse.
That's awesome. That is so
I
awesome.
almost don't think I should re-record that because that's the best awkward opening.
Yes,
Amanda
yes, it is.
McNamara. Amanda,
Yes,
how are you?
I'm great. Now that I'm combined with both names and you see me as Sarah, it is a compliment. So thank
See,
you.
I don't know if you're not watching, if you're listening to this, I just got about 4 shades redder because we met through a good friend of both of ours whose name is Sarah. But this is Amanda. And Amanda, I am excited to have you here today.
Well, I'm even more excited now. Let's see how funky we can get. So thank you
Yeah,
for having me today. I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to working with you.
I am too. This is the first time we've spoken, clearly, since I am messing up names left and right. And all right. Well, friends, this is how it goes. When you have those awkward moments, you just gotta lean in, enjoy it, and know that people's intention is coming from a good space, even if they are, doing the word salad in their head. But
I truly thought it was a trick just because you had stated that they said your name wrong or said your
oh,
name right
the
and then said it
right.
wrong. And so I was like, is this a trick?
Yeah, right before we were doing the intro, right before we started our episode, before we started recording you guys, we were talking about, oh, all the times people say your name wrong, which, I really believe manifesting happens, and I probably just did that to myself. So careful what you put in your head because that's going to change what's coming out. So Amanda, how are you? What's going on? What's going on that good in your world right now?
Well, I'm good. And thank you for asking. I am still trying to navigate my new journey of creating my business, Monarch Mental Health. And um, I create mental health journals. So that's kind of where I'm at, is navigating, um, trying to be in the moment and not
Mhm.
make too drastic of moves by creating too many journals that I can't pay for and produce and all that. But also doing a lot of networking and meeting a lot of great people along the way. Still making art, and that's kind of one of my therapy regimens, and hanging out with cool people like you.
I love that. So we're gonna get into that in just a minute. I hear what you're saying about trying to control this floodgate of the ideas and the thing like, oh, I've got, 10 ideas for journals and I've got to get them all done and out there. And you have that sense of that rush of it's all got to be done now. But then there's a lot that goes with that. There's the financial obligation of if you're paying for those, there's the time you don't want to, speaking of mental health, get burnout yourself because you're working so long. How do you manage that flow of, man, I got this huge pile of thoughts and ideas and this urgency to get it out there, and yet being okay with, okay, one right now is fine, two right now, whatever.
Um, One, I have an anxiety question. Am I looking here? Or am I looking at myself? Where are my eyes?
Um,
Say
right
when.
there is good.
Great,
Yeah,
thanks.
that's where I see you. And it's okay because
That
most
prior.
people are going to hear this on a recording and less watch the video, but every once in a while the videos go viral. So That's the whole thing. We just enjoy it. We lean into however awkward it's gonna be because I feel like my camera's up here, but then your face is over here, so it's like I want to look at you, but then I feel like I'm looking down. So
I am the captain now. Okay. Um, so trying to navigate the ideas, I honestly create what I call the big mama list. And it's where
okay.
I will sit down and write out every thought, um, just how to navigate maybe something that I'm working on, what it would take to execute that idea, and I put it on the big mama list. And then typically those things are like out of reach in that moment, right? You maybe it's creating a journal.
Mm,
Well, I can't just sit down and do that. I've got other tasks to do. So what I do then is move segments of those lists then, and break them down. So maybe I take three larger ideas off the big mama list for that week and just try and break it down and organize it as best I can.
hmm
Um, and I mean, let's be honest, I still have creative brain and bipolar brain. So I'm going to kind of get off the rails every now and again. Uh, but I really try to hone in on that list. And I have found, if I'm driving or if I'm talking to myself in the store, like we talked about, or laying in bed late at night and I'll think of an idea, if I don't put it in my notes in my phone, it never existed.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to write it down. Even if it was like maybe an idea that wouldn't work, such as the random thought at 2 a.m. of how do I make paintbrushes safe if I were to go into an inpatient behavioral unit. How do I make that work? And
Okay.
so I thought of silicone straws, and I was like, all right,
Mm.
um, if I can make this work to be less of a weapon, then maybe it would benefit obviously everybody involved. And then I told one of my friends, but I was like, well, there goes another million dollar idea. That how do you front it? And then I was like, oh, is there like fish tank? And they're like, you mean Shark Tank? And I was like, yeah, that one. I was like, I could dress up as the little inflatable guy you see at the car lots.
Oh yeah.
I'll like put a cup around me, and then I'll just be like this bendy straw for a paintbrush. And they're like, I would love to see you on Shark Tank. And I was just like, yeah, I just don't, I just black out. Cameras in front of me, I'll just black out. I'm like, I don't even
Right.
know who I am.
Well, and I love this whole way that you describe that whole process is so intriguing because I I think we all have that moment of that thought is gone and we captured it. If we didn't capture it, then we'll drive ourselves insane later trying to figure out, oh gosh, I had this thing. It was a really good idea. That
Yeah,
happens with me sometimes with jokes where I wake up in the middle of the night or I'm in a conversation with friends and I don't stop and write it down. And then later it's like, darn it, that was a really good one.
yeah.
Um, the one thing that really resonated that you said was it's out of reach for now or it's not attainable yet. And
Mhm.
I think that's so critical that we don't put that in a category that is just not doable at all. And you say, this doesn't make sense right now. I've got other stuff, but it doesn't mean that I can't do this thing. And then you methodically break that down into how do I get there? It can be attainable, but it's going to take these steps.
Yeah. It's taken a long, I mean, I appreciate that. It's taken a long time to figure out a system. And then sometimes it's even creating the system is easy, but staying with it is hard.
Sure.
Um, so again, it's that creative brain of, okay, I know how I've got a problem. I want to think of a way that would work for my brain and work within those guidelines, if you will. But then like, 3 days could pass and sometimes I'm like, wait, what the hell is the plan? And then I'll go back to the big model list and it's like it's again, it finally has kind of reined me in and made things a lot easier.
Sure. So I really appreciate that you do call out that it's not it's something you develop over time. We read all these self-help books. It's like, oh, get a system in place, do this, and I've tried that where I've read someone else's thing and I'm like, this is how I'm going to do it. I try to implement it and it has never worked for me. But the systems that I've developed over time naturally from how I work that I've put, oh, I got to put this part in place, I got to put that part in place. Those are the things that fit me and that actually produce results. But that took a long time to develop.
It's definitely, I mean, as we get older, and maybe if you're lucky prior, just have a lot of self-awareness. So the
Hmm.
older we get, the more self-awareness we have, which is why they say, like, what is it? I'm going to get this wrong. Serenity is bliss, or mindfulness.
Oh, yeah, like
What is it?
ignorance is bliss, or
Yeah,
yeah,
serenity. That I need that too. But
yeah,
yeah, that you just are unaware. So if you're
mhm,
unaware, it doesn't seem as stressful or time, time crunching or any of those things, because you're just living life, you're winging it.
right,
And so then we develop, or we start to become more self-aware. We start to internalize, okay, well, that worked for Jackie on her cute Instagram page. Maybe part of it will work for me, but I need to figure out how to grow from there and make it work for myself.
exactly.
So this is a sample of the Big Mama list.
Oh, I love that. I love this. So if you're listening and not watching, Amanda's got a notebook and it is chock full of ideas. Like you can just tell that you are in your zone right there where you're writing out idea after idea.
This one doesn't have as much completed, but
Okay, you got check marks, things are highlighted.
color coded. I use my colored pens to break it down. You have to make it again work for you, right? So I
Hmm.
love color. I love utilizing how to organize things based on color, what the task is. Is it more of an appointment? Is it more of a work at home thing? And
Right.
just breaking it down. And I think, like you're saying, again, looking at other people's plans. And I think about this too when I'm making these mental health journals. What I have come up with for myself may resonate with um, the user, but maybe only to a certain degree. So then it
Sure.
comes to talking to more and more people who battle with OCD, bipolar, any other diagnosis,
Hmm.
and saying, what would work for you? What do you feel this is lacking? Um, and again, that's where people get to tell their story too, is, which is the crucial part of my passion and mission with Monarch, is to continue to learn about other people's stories and how they've navigated to get to where they're at, and hopefully formulate a journal for as honed in as I can for those different diagnoses.
Hmm. So tell us a little bit about your journals. Are there different focuses based on issues people might have or results they want to do? What are the themes for different journals that you create?
Well, I wish I could say I'm on edition 5. I'm not. The first journal that launched was just this past May. It was May 30th.
Hmm.
And I released edition 1, which is a color theory symptoms tracker for bipolar 1. And
Okay.
each edition will be a different diagnosis. Um,
Okay.
because of, again, trying to navigate networking and navigate numbers and startup of a small business, and um, just trying to get the one off of the ground,
Right.
I had to hone in and say, okay, creative bonkers brain, like, you got to put it on hold. I still kind of dabble with it,
Hmm.
but I don't want to get ahead of myself. And I don't, yeah, I just don't want to get ahead of myself. So again, that's where the lists come into play of what would this include, or maybe I do kind of dabble with it from time to time if I get a cool idea. But
Hmm.
goal is, well, one of the goals is to have all of them, like right now you can buy them at Barnes and Noble. So maybe one day, excuse me, when they go on the
Right.
shelf at
When
Barnes,
they're on the shelf. Yes.
when they're on the shelf at Barnes and Noble, it'll go like Roy G. Biv, because all the spines will go from red to
Oh,
Roy G.
gotcha.
And again, for the visualization to understand, just that they are all approaching different struggles of those who battle with those diagnoses. Um, the whole concept that started Monarch, which would have been, I feel, created sooner had I not really had depressive episode crash.
Hmm.
It was back in February of 23. And I had finished what I thought was the finished journal. I printed in a manic state 200 copies from a local print company, which is not cheap.
Right.
Um, and I was like, that's it. This is it. We're going to launch. I
Hmm.
had LLC. I did not have a website. I had no social media. And I printed 200 copies. Um, but the first, I think I'm getting on a rabbit trail here. To answer the main question, there will be, again, journals for different diagnoses. Like, and of course, when people think of PTSD, they think military.
Hmm.
So working hopefully with the VA. What does that look like? What does trauma look like at firsthand, working with a physician or even a voluntary vet to work through that process with me? Um, and again, hearing people's story is what keeps us going, but also for non-military based PTSD and what that looks like for male and or
Right.
female.
Yeah.
Um, So lots of ideas that I try and say the when. Now I'm going to try, not, this. It's I'm going to do this when. And it's
Mhm.
taken a long time to say that because I would just stop and say, I'm not going to try, I'm going to do. And
Exactly.
do it. And if it ends up like me being bird shit on a windshield and being spontaneous enough to just wing it on that
Hmm.
Tuesday, I'm not afraid to. But again, it's taken a lot to really put the blinders on when needed. And like we said prior to, getting going with this, just being in the moment. So
Right. And there's a lot to we have to give ourselves that break of, you know what? I put something awesome out there. This is a lot of work. I It's okay if I take a little break and reset before I jump into the next thing because I think when we're someone like 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 the way we operate, it sounds like pretty similar where you have this flood of ideas that creates a lot of stress and a lot of pressure to always feel like you're not getting things done because the undone is so much greater than what we see as having been done.
yeah,
And then we're going, okay, well, I only wrote 3 books, but I've got out of 12 more. And yet, how many people have never written 3 books or created one journal that they've shared with the world, which is huge. So that's a huge balance.
it is. I think it also comes down to, I was just talking about this the other day, the concept that some people literally can do, what we've done.
Mhm.
And no matter how big or how small that list is, let's say there was only 5 things on the list and two of them were to make awesome journals and you only had 3 things left. But even though maybe you complete those two or even all five, some people just never truly have that feeling of accomplishment.
Yeah.
Like their dopamine doesn't say, woo, this is what's happened.
Hmm.
Celebrate, you can breathe. Or maybe if they do finally get the feeling of, success or relief or just again that accomplishment, it may take like a week for for it to hit, to register, hey, I've
Hmm.
done something, I've really gotten this knocked off the list. um
Right.
and if I'm being honest, there are times where maybe I've forgotten to highlight something on the big mama list, or maybe there's like the one day I was going through, crossing the t's, dotting the i's, and I'm going through it and I'm like, oh, I thought of this, I thought of this. I started making then a list almost twice the size of my done list,
Oh,
but it was
right.
stuff that I kept thinking of.
Hmm.
And sometimes during depression, or a depressive episode, well, shit, even with anxiety, I'll make my morning to-do list and, let's say it's um the stuff that was on the list, but then I got derailed and I started doing the dishes or I started doing an extra journal. And then it was like, you know what? Calm down, just write those on the list too, and then check them off to
Yeah.
feel accomplishment.
I have to do the same thing. You have
It's
to get credit for
yeah,
what
like
you
you said with
do.
our brain. Yeah, our
Mhm.
brain's got to be somehow connected. So,
I love that. Okay, well, you've probably given us some hints here. I didn't ask you about your awkward. What's your awkward thing? What's that thing you've had to really own?
well, uh, I would have to say, um, either just I should know this off the bat, right? So I'm here. What I want to say is, uh, I would say my weird humor, people not knowing how to take me, but first and foremost would be someone diagnosed with bipolar.
Mm,
Um, I don't necessarily though want to say that that's awkward. But it can be when it comes to having conversations about it. And I feel
sure.
that that's my main thought with that is um having tough and awkward conversations sometimes about
Yeah.
mental illness and especially lived experience with bipolar.
Well, and I love how you just answered that in that what you think people may say, well, this is what should be the awkward thing. When you've truly owned it and you feel good about yourself with that thing as part of your life and you know how to function and operate and not have that hold you back, that's the heart of owning your awkward because it doesn't feel how we would define awkward anymore. It's like this is part of me. This is actually what makes me rock. This is what makes me a good artist. And because I know how to lean into the strengths that come from it and also cope with the things that sometimes make life harder. That's all part of the package. And so it's like it is that sense of, well, I don't want to say it's awkward because we've been taught that's kind of a bad word or it's a negative thing.
Yep. And again, it's been a long time to get there. I um appreciate your kind words in saying that. With I was diagnosed with bipolar when I was 19. I'm 33 now.
Hmm.
And I feel like I just went through adolescence and teens, and it was like that's all you get. That's it. That's your cutoff. Now you're in your 20s and you're gonna live the rest of your life battling bipolar. Um, but it wasn't up until I was probably 23, maybe 24, until I realized how important it was to take my mental illness seriously and how important it was to learn about bipolar, what all it entailed to try and find stability that again would work for you, and
Hmm.
learning just learning about it so you can take care of yourself. I said, it's like I'm going to live with this the rest of my life. I have to find a way to navigate. Um, and only, everyone, we know ourselves best. Whether or not you go into provider, a lot of people say they don't want to push back. Ask the question. Is it going to be maybe if the provider feels awkward that you as a patient ask a question because they're feeling maybe threatened that, why are you questioning my judgment? You don't have my brain, you don't have my body, you have a book and you have knowledge of everything that you do. And I would always do my best to say I respect you and your profession, like when starting out with a new provider, but I am going to ask questions because I need to learn about the medications, or I need to understand what parts of the brain does it affect and how does that work.
Right.
um, I can't just so I learned then about patient advocacy and how important that was. Um, so it's taken a long time to just not feel scared to say I battle with bipolar. I'm not okay right now. I'm in a manic state, and maybe it was an ugly side of a manic state, and you don't want to go to a family gathering because maybe that's a trigger and it's going to amplify it.
Hmm.
You don't want people to see you like that because that's not who you are. It's a part of you. And once
Right.
you learn that about any mental illness, it's a part of you and does not define you. You have to learn to find that balance and again, a way to communicate this is where I'm at.
Hmm.
And it's again taken a long time to get here.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing to be able to share something that we can see as very vulnerable, where you say, oh, if someone, I think, we get so caught up early on in how is someone going to receive the information. And so then it limits us from sharing the information that sometimes is most important to share, instead of being like, you know what? And also we don't have to always give an explanation of, I'm not coming to that thing. They don't even need to know if it's because of my
No.
mental state today or because I would rather be home scrubbing dishes or using a toilet bowl brush on the bottom of the toilet, like whatever the
Yeah.
thing is. It's like, I really just don't want to see you people today.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah, I can't agree with that more. The explanation part, that's probably something I should work on. But I feel and felt that I just came down to like a point of honesty of,
Mhm.
and also just to let them know, especially depending on obviously the relationship, right, of the
Right.
person, of this is where I'm at with my mental health. Like, don't,
Hmm.
if I say I'm in a depressive state, don't expect anything out of me. Like, this is my baseline. I will
Right.
always do what I can to show up and how I can, but I'm not in a good spot right now. And I think that, when the journey started, I always thought of my grandpa, and everything that I learned was point blank, would this have saved his life?
Mhm.
Knowing this bit of information, would this have saved his life? Uh, and I was 4 going on 5 when he passed, and I still have memories of my grandpa,
Mhm.
and who battled with bipolar. This is 70s, maybe early 80s. Um, a man, a husband, a dad of 7 kids,
Mm-hmm.
and battling with bipolar.
Wow.
And the I have some of his journals, and I don't know if that's what prompted me, along with 2 other important teachers and people I've met along the way, to start journaling. But journaling is where this journey started.
Hmm.
And again, asking hard questions, and again, even reading, one of my main tools was Take Charge of Bipolar by Julie Fast.
Okay.
um, Without her book, I truly don't feel I would even, one, would be here today, but also be where I am with Monarch.
Mhm.
And being inspired to want to talk about it and help people. A lot of people would struggle with the religion factor, like maybe you've been cursed, you've been jinxed, or you're a bad person, so here's some mental health, and believing in God. I never felt like I was being punished by having a mental illness. Again, understanding it was a part of me, was okay. Now that I have learned what I know, and being passionate about helping others through their journey, was like, and this was also discovered not in a manic state, so I wasn't feeling like a glorified person who
Mhm.
was a martyr or something, but was,
Right.
how do I help people, um maybe ask some of those hard questions for themselves. um and so with the journal, I actually was able to meet up with my pediatrician at the time, again when I was 19. My mother, which would have been her dad, um, that lost his life to suicide,
Mhm.
when he was 56, I believe. Um, she didn't know what to do when I was in my manic state, and um, had my first episode, or major episode, if you will. And I went into the room with the pediatrician who had seen me since birth, obviously with my mother who I was very close with. And it was like, how do I even begin to say, I don't want to live here anymore. I don't want to be alive. I don't want to, uh, I don't want to be awake. Um, I couldn't say it. I could
Yeah.
not say it. And I had my journal, and I remember just pushing my journal over to my pediatrician and said, "Here, this is where we're at. This
Wow.
is the OG journal."
Mm.
And that's where it started. I did rip out some pages because it was some hard stuff, and um I didn't want to remember in that detail what I had written. I
Sure.
know in my heart and in my head it was a lot
Right.
of stuff. I don't want to reread that. So that's again where it started, and seeing some of the things that my grandpa had journaled about. And that's circle back around is why I brought up the religion factor, is he prayed in these journals. He was very religious, read his Bible, went to church, all that good stuff. And he just prayed continuously in these journals to for God to take pain and suffering away from him. And it was just, it's so, even now to read it and see his handwriting from the various pages in the journal, or in the notebook, almost what state of mind he was in while he was writing
Oh
these things.
yeah. You could see it physically in the handwriting.
Oh yeah. And
Wow.
and I won't get into it right now, but my creative brain and asking questions of, okay, well, the science behind tangibility and understanding your handwriting patterns. Like there are handwriting analysis professions out there to
Yeah.
like read a killer's note or something like
Right.
that.
Yeah. And based on,
Um
how happy or depressed somebody is based on
yeah.
their handwriting.
Yes, it was very impactful. And then to
Excuse me.
read those things that he was writing, it was just like this poor guy just was in so much pain. Um,
Yeah.
really prompted me to kind of keep journaling, to release some of my thoughts in my head.
Yeah. Clearly now I can see why these journals you're releasing are so close to home because not only was it such an important part of your journey when you were a teenager,
Yeah.
but then also seeing your grandfather's. At what point did you start seeing his journals? Were you like when you were journaling as a 19-year-old, had you already seen his journals or were you aware that he had or
No,
okay.
and that's the
Wow.
part that gives me
Yeah,
chills.
I know my arm, my hair on my arm just started to get tingles. I'm like, oh my gosh, you just connected.
Yeah. I had not seen his work. I remember picking up, and why I have this, sky blue journal. I don't know how I ended up in my hands, but when things started to get really heavy and have the intrusive thinking, uh, my my eighth grade teacher actually had brought up journaling and had us write in a journal either every morning, three sentences and three things you were grateful for or wanted for your future or something like that. And it stuck. And again, here recently, I was actually able to connect with her and tell her thank you, because she
Hmm.
is on my journey. She was a part of my journey,
Wow.
who introduced journaling and made it to be known it's a safe space to write down your thoughts and a way to express yourself on any level, because it's yours. And if you want to share it, you can, but it's a safe space to just release. And that
Yeah.
stuck with me. And then writing in then my own journal once things definitely happened with my brain, and being more intentional about writing in it. um, I believe my aunt or my mother had given me this small journal from my grandpa, and it was just like, oh my gosh.
Wow.
And again, reading the heavy things that he wrote were so similar to my cries out in my journal of, take this pain, I can't handle it.
Hmm.
um, so it was just very kind of bizarre to then, yeah, find that journal and see how it resonated with him.
Right. So how you mentioned, getting to that point where you're 19 and you get the diagnosis and it's also that time frame in life, regardless of what you have going on, where we have this attitude of your teen years are over, now you're expected to be an adult, go live your life, and you should just have it figured out. Which, any of us who have lived more than a few years past that knows that's not reality.
Yeah.
But in that moment, do you remember what that felt like to get the diagnosis? I wonder if it's fear, relief, everything.
So for me, again, having the pediatrician know our family history and getting me to a psychiatrist, as soon as possible. She was able to put me on medication to somewhat get me stable on that situation, but then got me the help I needed through a psychiatrist. And again, with my mom in the room, answering some very hard questions, looking at her, is this okay to say? Or
Mm.
looking at her saying, I'm about to say some shit that may or may not disrupt your life,
Right.
be prepared. Um,
Very
but when I,
considerate.
yes, well, fear. Um,
Right.
so when I found out, it was, for me, it was definitely a relief because it gave me an understanding of why I was doing things that I was doing prior to the diagnosis, prior to even the major depressive slash major manic state. I mean, it was very much a mixed state when I flew off the hinges, if you will.
Hmm.
Um, and it was like, oh, this is what anxiety is. This is why you would feel this way. And um, now looking back after learning about it and living with it and finding medications at work, I look back still at times where I'm like, how amazing was it that and I feel it's for everyone, that our brains and our bodies help us become very instinctual to take care of ourselves
Yeah.
through the unknown crisis or unknown situations.
Hmm.
And for me, that was running. I didn't know why when I was
Okay.
manic, and again, not knowing I was manic, would need to go run. It was like my every muscle in
Mm.
my body
Yeah.
was flexed, and I felt like the Hulk. How do you release it? It was to go run.
Yeah.
And so looking back, it just kind of connected the pieces for me.
Mm.
And unfortunately, again, as I go on my journey and meet those who also have a diagnosis of bipolar 1 or bipolar 2, is they're still in a situation where they don't want to be connected to that.
Mm.
They don't want to, quote, identify as bipolar or have that be a part of their identity.
Hmm.
And it's, again, I it breaks my heart because it's like, again, it's a part of you. It's not
Right.
defining your every move. It doesn't
Hmm.
define your personality. Those are
Right.
all in separate pods. They're all different.
Hmm.
They all make you, but it's not something. And again, it comes around the stigma of
Yeah.
bipolar. You hear bipolar. I mean, shit, I was single for almost 10 years. If I wanted a guy that I really wasn't maybe that interested in, and I wanted him gone, I'd be like, drop the B word. I'm like, yeah, I'm bipolar.
Yeah.
Boom. Be gone. Nothing
Right.
was
I
said.
know. I actually have a few of those things in my I'm single and in my dating career. It's like, oh, if I'm not interested in this person, I'll just let them know this and they'll just
Yeah.
be gone quick.
I have trauma.
Yeah. I love that you talk about not like how people do and don't want to identify with things. And I think there's danger on both ends of that spectrum, right? Where if we don't see it as part of who we are and we don't accept it, now we're not incorporating the things that we need to, and also taking all the good things out of what this brings to our life. Because there's a lot of good things from having your brain work a certain way that we overlook because we get so focused on the challenges of it. But also, if we only lean into that one thing, now we're making it like, well, we might be leaning in a way where we say, well, I need you to accept me because I have this thing. And instead of it being, hey, everyone has a thing that happens to be mine, or making so much of everything about it that we almost over explain things. And one of the exercises I do in some of the workshops I do for development with people is I use a beach ball
Yep.
and I talk about how all of the stripes on the beach ball make up who we are. We are like a beach ball, and the problem we tend to make is that we get lopsided with our stripes and we make any one thing be like a red rubber ball where it's like I'm just this. It's like no, we've got all these different things that make up who we are, and different people in our lives might not ever see certain stripes because they're on the other side of the ball, or they may see a little sliver of them, but they're just all part of who we are, and we got to keep those in balance.
Yes, for sure. Again, my like I said, with the self-awareness, um, either like you said, having maybe too much knowledge or for instance, sometimes I feel like it's a double-edged sword. Okay. I now am aware of most of my triggers, right? I'm still learning about this and how I navigate in my brain. But if I'm aware of most of my triggers, let's say I am struggling with my hearing sensitivities and there's a loud concert that I have to go to or a loud social gathering, I know how I'm probably going to react because it's
Mhm.
happened again and again and again and again. More than likely, it's going to happen to where I have a panic attack or this happens or whatever that symptom may be, their side effect that may be.
Right.
And then it's like, well, shit, now I have to have pre anxiety before the anxiety and before the panic attack. So, again, that's where that whole ignorance is bliss thing. Before, I would just wait till it happened and then find a way to navigate in that moment. So
Sure.
now it's kind of like backtracking, like, okay, but now you have the tools to work through that better in a healthier
Yeah.
way instead of just going into flight mode and doing a natural response. I mean, as again, best your body knew how to take care of you. But
Hmm.
now you have the tools, silicone earplugs, never knew those existed. Certain things like that. That's like, oh, okay, now I'll implement that into my care plan. But it,
Sure.
it is, it's a struggle. It's just normal people, quote fingers people here, normal people don't typically have to go through 5 steps to achieve the one thing.
Right. Yeah.
And that comes down to like neurodivergence and those other types of mental illnesses that it's just kind of when you stop and think about it, you're like, oh, that was kind of exhausting, but I finally made it to this freaking party.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. And I imagine even sometimes that comes down to, well, I can go, but it will be for this length of time, or I will go, but I'll get here under these terms, or what you have to set. And I think no matter what we have going on, we have to learn what makes us feel good, what makes us successful, how we're going to best navigate any situation, and whether that is a bipolar situation or anxiety or anything that we have going on can affect that. And I mean, I had one guy on my show, and his awkward was that he loves to be the center of attention. And
okay.
he's not trying to be narcissistic, but he loves entertaining and being that thing. And it's like he may have to learn to, you know what, some parties I have to just only stay for a certain amount of time because I don't want to exhaust everybody else because of my
Yep.
need for that. And so there's a host of reasons why people have to do what they have to do, but it does come down to, like you said, knowing yourself. And there are so many times where I think of that ignorance is bliss comment. And I don't know how many times if you've had this where you say, I just want to be ignorant again. I just want to not know.
Um, Sadly, sometimes more often than not, I'm like, and I always say it too. I get excited for birthdays. I'm like, it's another year of learning, and I'm like, oh my god, it hurts sometimes. Like, I am not the
Right.
smartest person by any means. But I try to have a grasp on my personal life and well-being. But again, like I said, sometimes it's just that double-edged sword to where I wish it
Right.
wasn't so exhausting just trying to execute one thing
Right.
emotionally. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You have given us a wealth of ideas, information, perspective. This is so amazing, Amanda. I do want to make sure we've touched on what you do with your journals with Monarch. Uh, Tell us a little bit about just the foundation of Monarch. What is it in a nutshell that your mission is with helping people through that and how people can support it, what your business entails. We know about the journals, obviously. I know that you've got a lot of goals with Monarch.
Yeah. I appreciate you reining me in here. Time is of the essence. You said it earlier. So with Monarch Mental Health, it's the passion and goal is basically to create a communication tool. All of the journals will incorporate color theory because, again, it comes down to how do we communicate and how maybe someone doesn't enjoy just lined journaling. Maybe it takes a prompt to get their gears going. Maybe it's a way to just express their for instance, this an episode. So even this is where it started back in 20. This is a 2021 entry here. Just a generic brain
Okay.
image that I was coloring to state, "Hi, I'm manic, and this is where I'm at," because I was struggling so much with side effects of medications that
Hmm.
I felt like I was lacking the ability to say I'm not okay. Um,
Right.
and so when I, going through this process, and again, the passion and want to be able to listen to other people's stories and how they navigate, is to take all of that into consideration, because I can't remember if this was pre-recording or recording, but when we talked about how just different people understand how different all of these diagnoses affect each of us,
Right.
and just how different we are in general. So it's like, how do you incorporate those who have, um when you hear OCD, the washing of the hands and the stereotypical, what is his name, Jack Nicholson, that whole
Mhm.
concept of Hollywood creating that, obviously to emphasize this is how bad it could be, to understand the intensity of it, right? But
Right.
not everyone's symptoms of OCD are even relatable to that type of symptoms, to those types of symptoms that he dealt with. um, so in the journals, now we have the brain log has evolved. I think I've gone through 6 prints now. The OG prototype here was not very big, but it has the brain log, and it's a way to log Monday through Sunday, where you're at, um, with your mood fluctuations. Are you, there's different options. And so it's all color based. And at the very beginning of the journal, it talks about, like I said, the importance of tangibility, why it's a monthly journal and not an app or something on your screen. It's so we can also look at our handwriting. What does that say to us? How hard are we coloring? How light are we coloring? It
Yeah.
expresses so much. And then, of course, using color to put the creativity into it, and not just some mundane thing. The journals also include a safety plan. So for when you're in crisis, what do you do? What do you need to communicate with your family, your partner, caregivers, whoever you is part of your tribe? What do you do when you're in crisis? So it has a very simplified safety plan in the back, 2 pages to elaborate on that plan. Again,
Hmm.
everyone's care plan is different. Some people don't seek medical care for battling with bipolar and other diagnoses. Um, so there are herbal supplement trackers in here, um,
Okay.
along with medication trackers. But um, my, of course, with my other passion being art, the goal is to have every monthly journal change out with local artists' illustrations. So, like, there's 5 illustrations in the journal that were created by a local artist.
Gorgeous.
So, to share their work, um, maybe do a bio on them and share their story.
Hmm.
It's just about continually forming a tribe and creating that safety for yourself. And like I said, with the journal, should be your safe space. And if you feel that, again, my main thing is sometimes things are just too hard to say out loud. And part of that story was true for me.
Yeah.
And if you can't say it out loud, open the page to the journal that you feel safe to and say, "This is where I'm at." The other important thing of doing that is the fact that, with the communication piece, oh gosh, brain fart.
When you can't
I
say it
had
out
it.
loud and you can write it down.
You can write it down, but oh gosh, I don't even know. Um,
Well, it
the
was telling when you shared your story about passing that journal across to your doctor and being able to say, this is where we're at. I think that's so powerful. Not that these are to, you don't journal planning to share,
Correct.
but um, I know when I was 19, I would not have had the guts to do that. That's huge. I would anything that I wrote when I journaled or wrote stuff, like I was very selective on what got shared with the world because I'm like, I don't feel comfortable with myself, let alone anybody else. So,
I was fighting hard to hopefully never feel as bad as I had felt,
mhm,
knowing that I didn't want to feel that way. And it was either, a lot of people who battle again with bipolar and the creativity factor of, I don't want to be put on medication and lose my creativity. I didn't
right,
have an option. It was either medication or you never get to experience art again because you will not be here.
right,
It wasn't a choice. And hard call to make, yeah, at 19 and join into big pharma and still remain a part of big pharma to understand that if I don't have stability and if I didn't take medications that were maybe murdering my liver every day, I have to make the choice that and understand that death is inevitable, and I either now live here dealing with maybe side effects of medications to create some stability or have a disruptive life in chaos and be uncomfortable until the day of passing.
wow,
So I know that's heavy,
that's,
but I also, my blank thought
mhm,
was, I don't, had I had this in depth of a journal when everything was going on and I was learning throughout the years, I truly don't feel I would have masked my emotions as much as I did with providers.
mhm,
Um, when they ask you, how have you been the last 2 weeks? Well, I'm fine now. I was good then. And in reality, maybe I was completely unstable, but I am dealing with mania and I'm in
yeah,
denial that there was chaos. So to be able to look back and reflect again on the consistencies or inconsistencies of the brain is just very important as you learn about your awareness, what works for you,
right.
what doesn't. And again, if you're comfortable, use it as a communication tool.
Yeah, I was having a similar conversation in my last session with my therapist of, how's it going? Where are you at? And it's like, and I actually said to him, I said, well, last time we had therapy, it's every 2 weeks. And it was like, we had a session and then 2 days later, like the bomb drops. And I'm like, oh man, I need to go back to therapy like right now. And then I said, but then, 10 other things have happened since then. And I'm like, I'm great right now. And part of me balances that it's this balancing act of, okay, do I record everything that happens in my life so I can rehash all of that when we're in the moment, or do I accept that there is an ebb and flow of life of that space was harder to get through, and 48 hours later I had moved on and now we're in this space, and just talk about the process. And I love that what your journal does is it documents and captures it as you're going through that time so you can have that conversation of like, okay, maybe I'm showing up feeling good right now, but maybe I felt good this morning because I knew I was going to have this appointment. you,
Yeah.
and that's what got me into a good space. However, Thursday was not the best day, and Friday was okay, but Tuesday was horrific, and Wednesday, for whatever reason, was amazing.
Yeah. It's what I think it comes down to, and you made a good point, is duration. The duration of how long did it affect you? So some people say, well, I have road rage, or everybody has road rage, or everybody has this. It's like, okay, but did it affect you to where it became an intrusive thought for the rest of the week?
Oh, right. Yeah.
Or was it just an hour because you were heated, you had too much caffeine, now you have road rage, and then it's done and you're off at a baby shower and you're fine and happy?
And you moved on. Yeah.
You've moved on. So it's like, what is the duration of time that you felt a big feeling?
Yeah.
And if it prolonged to where it was something that was consuming you and taking what you feel maybe is longer than it should, then I think it's definitely something to talk about.
Yeah.
The whole don't cry over spilt milk. Okay, cool. We'll not log that. But
Right.
if it's something that becomes if it starts affecting your life, and that's again, same thing with OCD. If it starts affecting your life or any mental illness, that's when you know it may be a good time to reach out for help.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective. That's so important to be aware of win? Because I think we're bogged down with these thoughts of, am I overreacting, or am I making too big of a deal out of this? And yet it never hurts to ask the question. Um, before we go, I feel like we can't leave without giving some space to your art. You've touched on art. We can see the art in the background if we're watching the video. There's an easel with just a beautiful, colorful painting, and there's a a woman who looks like she's being painted. So, and oh, look at this. That is another piece of beautiful art that's framed and everything. So, are these are all pieces that you've made, Amanda?
Yeah, this is my self portrait. Can't you see?
I can see how it can be that.
Uh,
It's awesome. So
yeah.
tell us,
So
yeah, tell us about your art. How does it play into what you do? I know you mentioned, or you told me before we got started, you have some activities people can join.
yeah. So art for me really became a. I mean, I've already always loved art, art history especially, but once I realized I needed healthy coping skills to it started with the mania, right? I needed a healthy coping skill. So I wasn't being erratic. I wasn't being Samantha from Sex in the City and drinking lots of alcohol and who knows what else. Um, yeah, not Patricia, it's Samantha. But honing in on it and finding a safe way to let out my energy. Uh, One of the impactful things was someone had questioned what a mixed state or a mixed episode was, even with bipolar. Oh man, I was like, it was a kind of a confrontational conversation. And I'm like, oh, I'll just paint it. So I painted it. I utilized what I felt again looked like the harder part of mania and what it looked like intertwined with depression. I didn't know how else. I'm not John Coffey from the Green Mile. I can't hold your hand and let you see shit that you should probably see and feel.
Hmm.
Um, so the best way again to communicate for me was to be like, this is where I'm at. And color is my main again passion when it comes to doing anything, whether it's just a piece of work that I'm doing for leisure or anytime I'm creating art, it is heavily done with texture, and it usually tells a story about mental health. And it's always abstract because I cannot wrap my mind around doing making something look like it's supposed to. It's got to look nothing like it's supposed to. Like, let's make it operate differently.
Sure.
Um, but it's always abstract. It's usually always incorporating collage. But when it comes to the painting process of really hashing it out, depending on how I'm feeling, is a great release. Again, tangible release to help myself process through some of my emotions.
I love that. I think that the the correlation to your expressing how you're feeling and what you're experiencing, putting it on paper, it's how many times do you have people say, or do you say like, man, I wish I could get in that person's head, or like see how they think or what they process. I've had people say that to me so many times because I'm usually saying something that's just out of left field. They're like, how did you get there?
Yes.
But
Yes. Especially with my
painting it,
art. Yeah.
yeah, it's just such a beautiful idea because it's like I'm getting this visual of when you all the kids walk into Willy Wonka's factory at first, and all of a sudden like opens up this thing, and also it's like you're in his head of like, who knew I could eat a flower and it would be candy, and the river could be chocolate, and it's these
Yes.
possibilities that we would limit if we're trying to attach words and explanations to it.
Yeah. It's definitely again the color aspect has definitely brought it full circle for me, especially with Monarch, and hoping that, you know, art therapy and just even art peer support groups um, can just be a way for people to communicate or maybe just express where they're at.
Hmm.
Um, and back to your thing of, you know, people asking what is going on inside your noggin, or I wish I could see what the heck you're thinking of in your bonkers brain, um, is asking questions, right? We don't learn new things just without asking a question. How will we ever learn? And I feel the most impactful thing that ever meant, I mean, a lot of things meant the world to me, but what stood out the most and made my acceptance of bipolar more ease was people asking about it, asking
Sure.
questions. What does mania look like to you? What does this look like? Because there's such that stigma around it and around the other diagnoses of what it's supposed to look like. But asking me personally, what does it look like for you? And again, for me to maybe express that through art. Um, and again, it's the only way I really feel we can end the stigma is just by
Yeah.
talking about it. It all starts with the conversation. I don't care if it's what's going on in your head, you know, what did you mean by saying that? Just inquiring about people to learn their process and their
Yeah.
story.
Well, what does it say to you, or how does it feel when someone doesn't ask? When you know they know what's going on and they just don't even have any curiosity?
Like per se, like maybe I'm in a really bad manic state or
Yeah, like if people are just like, "Oh, that's just Amanda," or whatever, and they just don't ask you, like,
um I guess it kind of depends on the context of is it something that I maybe have a heavy heart that like why didn't they ask me that in that time? I don't know, man. I think that if they're not going to ask, um it is what it is. I'm thinking of the time where I was in the coffee shop and was just having more of an intimate conversation, right? And
sure.
I touched on it briefly. I'm struggling with depression, and they started the conversation of, oh, what's that look like? If someone doesn't ask me, it's not like I think, oh, this person's just ignorant and they're just going to go on the rest of their life thinking that depression is just sadness because you didn't have any sunshine. Um, and they tell you to smile more and just be happy. But
Right. Yeah, yeah,
those,
just smile. That'll fix everything, right?
yeah, and just think happy thoughts. It's not that I would ever think, why didn't they or they should have. More often than not, I feel like I just kind of am too open sometimes and just again that bird shit on a windshield, just say it like this is
Hmm.
what depression looks like, or maybe I've talked about it enough that they get it. But if somebody doesn't ask or they're not interested in what I have, people, what I've learned, people don't ask, like people don't go after things that they don't want to know about, right? Like if I don't care about baseball, so I'm not going to go all of a sudden start going to baseball games and read about baseball
Sure.
and gain knowledge about it. I don't care about it, right?
Yeah.
To someone who doesn't really give a shit about mental health, how it works, what is bipolar truly, they're not gonna look into it, and that's okay. But the hope is that maybe someone listening to this or sees my TikTok of me playing the tambourine because I needed an outlet. And why does she need that outlet? Again, how people process things so differently and how they cope. um I just hope that everyone at some point in their life can gain more self-awareness. I can't stress it enough.
Right. Well, I also imagine that there's a relative conversation level depending on, like you mentioned earlier, whether you give someone a reason why you're not coming to an event or not varies depending on the relationship with the person, and that, you know, every stranger that you run into doesn't have to ask you why you're not smiling today, or you could be having the happiest day of your life and not wearing a smile on your face. That's never
Yeah.
related. That's a lot more intrusive of questioning versus sitting with a really close friend at a
Yes.
coffee shop where it's like, okay, maybe you don't care about baseball, but if you know that I'm going to the Olympics for baseball, I'd hope you'd ask at least a couple questions because you care about me.
Exactly. And it comes down to safety too. Like, do
Sure.
you feel safe expressing yourself
Yeah.
um, to maybe someone who is non-judgmental or who is going to ask those questions? And maybe that's what you just needed today. Maybe you needed to meet with your mom or your best friend because they completely understand they're your tribe. Whereas if like you said, as a friend, if you were interested in baseball, yeah, I'm going to support you how I can, but some rando is not going to do that. They're not going to want to come to your local baseball games and support you. They're just be like, yeah, that's cool. Congratulations. You got to play baseball.
Right. Yeah. Good for you. That's exciting. All right. Now, we've got links to all your socials, all your website, all this good stuff is in the description. But out of all those, where are you most active? Where's the best place for people to find you, support you? Where, I know we all have those social media pages where it's like, yeah, I'm on here, but I don't check it as much. So,
Yeah, so I kind of feel like at the end of the day with my filing cabinet, how I write things down all the time, and lack of social media, I may or may not be like a 65, 67-year-old woman. So as far as socials go, I would say for more so locals, Facebook. I do my best to post on Instagram, but honestly, if you want any information about local bipolar community, a peer support group, the art peer support group, and especially purchasing the journal, Monarch M as in Monarch Health.org is where most of the information's at. I do the most sporadic type things on TikTok. So I'm going to be more of just my free self
sure.
and gently talk about mental health and uh that's beautiful bipolar brain. So I'm still
Mhm.
navigating trying to do the whole social media thing. It's very tedious, even with AI and Pinterest pictures. I hate it. So if you
Mhm.
see a post, pat yourself on the back for me that I did it. But yeah, any questions at all, usually you can just DM me on Instagram.
Perfect.
Just wherever is most convenient for you. I'll find it.
Okay. Well, the last thing I want to ask you before we go, I just like to leave with knowing, a little challenge or advice you'd leave our people with on leaning into themselves, owning their awkward, something they can do this week or that you challenge them to do.
I like this. I like a good challenge. Hmm. My challenge for you, or yeah, for all of you, would be to, if you know someone who battles with mental health, um, and maybe they're more quiet than usual, just reach out to them or anyone that you know. Reach out to someone that you know and just say, I'm thinking of you today, and send them the little flower bouquet emoji and just say, thinking of you. It is the today Hallmark card, and just let them know that they are on your mind. A little bit goes a long way, and who knows, maybe that starts a conversation.
Mm.
Um, the other thing I would challenge is to take out a piece of paper, per Mrs. Burns, and write three things that you're grateful for, and 3 lines of where you're at, what you want your future to look like. Of maybe I am going now. I'm trying to go to the grocery store. I am going to the grocery store today, and I'm going to do my best, and whatever that may be. Or I'm going to go to the park today. 3 things you're grateful for, and try and utilize color and when you're writing out your 3 things you're grateful for based on your mood, and look into color theory. It's really impressive.
I think we're gonna have to do that. I'll put a link in the description too, because I think there's so many good things from what you've shared today, from art to journaling to just asking questions. This is so inspiring. I'm like amped up for the day. I'm ready to start texting people and journaling and go to the store and buy some paints because
Yes, thank
I
you. I appreciate
this
that.
is
I'm glad that you've gotten something out of this, and I hope that the listeners will too. And I just want to say thank you to everyone that I've met along my journey, and thank you now for being a part of my tribe and ask me to be on your show.
thank you, Amanda. I can't wait to see all the amazing things that we get to do together. So
It's right
thank you.
on.
Everybody else, be sure you go out there, do some journaling, catch up with Amanda, follow her, and of course, own your awkward. Thank you so much for listening in for today's show. Be sure to visit awkwardcareer.com to continue your journey. And of course, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends so they can find their awkward side and learn how to own it.